Hi, my name is Sarah, and today we're sewing the Swanton Blouse by Cashmerette. The Swanton Blouse is part of the Cashmerette Club membership program. If you want to learn more about the club, check out the link in the description. The Swanton Blouse features princess seams in the front, darts in the back, and has 3 collar options. 1 that's a short collar, and 2 are ties in different widths. It has a covered placket, hide your buttons, gathers at the top of the sleeve, pleats at the bottom with a little sleeve band finish. Are you ready to get sewing? Let's do it. The Swanton requires light to mid-weight woven fabrics like linen, rayon, or cotton. I'm going to be using a rayon crepe today. You'll also need some buttons for your placket, and I'll be using a straight stitch to assemble it and finishing my seams with an serger or an overlock. But you can finish your seams however you like, using French seams or zigzag or whatever method you prefer. All seams are 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeters, and the stitch length is 2.5. All right, let's get to it. Our first step today is we're going to interface some of our pattern pieces. The interfacing piece that you cut for your covered button placket, piece 6A, we're going to cut this up into 4 pieces. We're going to cut it into 2 1.5 inch wide strips and 2 1 inch wide strips. You can set one of those 1 inch wide strips aside for a future project. We're going to take one of these 1.5 inch wide strips and we're going to fuse it to 5A, your left button placket. You might want to consult the instructions to make sure that you get this in the correct side of your button placket. It should look like this. If your fabric is wrong side up and this is the top end, the interfacing is going to be on your left as you're looking at it. We also need to interface our collar or our necktie, depending on which one you're sewing. I'm going to be sewing both today, so if you're making the collar, you want to interface one collar, and if you're making one of the neckties, you want to interface 2 of your neckties, either view. Our next bit of preparation is we're going to stay stitch our neckline just inside the seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch. We're going to start from the shoulder and work down to the center for our back, and do the other side starting again at the shoulder. We're going to do the same thing to our 2 center fronts. Start at the shoulder and work toward the center front. All right, we're ready to begin assembling our swanton. We're going to sew our darts on the back, and we're going to start from the waist or the widest part of the fisheye dart, and we're going to sew to each end separately. We'll fold the dart point to point or vanishing point to vanishing point. Line up your points. I always know where my pin goes into the fabric is where the points are that I'm sewing to or from. We're going to repeat for the other end of the dart, starting again at this widest place, the waist. Make sure you don't get any gaps in your stitching. And now we'll repeat for the other dart. We have our darts, now we're going to press. All right, so first we'll press our darts nice and flat. Just the dart. All right, now we'll press the darts towards the center. We're going to sew our front to our side fronts now. We're going to line up all the notches and we're going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Line up our notches. What I usually do is I'll have the front, which is down on the bottom here, and I'll line it up in line with the needle, and then I'll pull the side front so that the cut edges line up to one another, lining up those notches at the same time. I try not to stretch anything while I'm sewing. It's very tempting, but the seam is the exact same length, so there's no ease built in. You don't want to stretch the bust out. All right, we'll repeat for the other side. Here we have. All right, so we've matched our notches. Right here where the side front meets the armhole along the edge here, you want to make sure you're lining this up on the seam line. Don't line up your cut edges like this. You won't have enough. So you want to make sure that you're finding your 1/2 inch line here parallel to this cut edge, and then lining that up to the point here. So find 1/2 inch parallel to here and line it up at that juncture right there. So you'll have a little bit hanging off, and that's correct. I always sew with the side front on top. It's a little easier to manage the curve on the front. All right, so now you want to finish your raw edges with a zigzag or maybe a parallel stitch to that line or an overlock. All right, now we're going to press our side front seams here. Let's add some gathering stitches on your shoulders of your fronts. So we're going to add 2 rows of gathering stitches between your notches here at the shoulder. You can see our notches are right here. And we're going to keep these 2 rows of stitches inside the seam allowance. You can use a stitch length of like 3, 3.5, 4, anything that will make your particular fabric easy to gather. All right, now we'll grab the tails, gather it up a little bit, pull from both ends. We're going to match the width of our back shoulder. And we'll repeat for our other front shoulder. And now we're going to sew our shoulder seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then finish the edges. Make sure those thread tails don't get sewn in the seam and your gathering stitch doesn't show on the right side. Make sure you put your stitch length back to 2.5. Making sure my thread tails are sticking out of this seam allowance here. And I like to arrange my gathers so they look evenly distributed there. So to the left of your gathering stitches. And now we're going to remove our gathering stitches by just pulling on the same tails we used to draw it up, or get rid of the other side of the thread. And now we're ready to finish this edge with however method you're finishing your seams. There we have our finished shoulder seam with our gathers. We're going to pleat the bottom edge of our sleeve, and we're going to start on the back and go toward the front. And each pair of these notches is 1 pleat. So this is my back sleeve. I have my double notch right here. I'm going to find my first set of notches. I'm going to position the sleeve like this, notch to notch. And I try and pin this so that it's nice and parallel to one another, each of these pleats, and the pleat is perpendicular to the sleeve edge. Should have 4 pleats total. Here we go, we have our 4 pleats. And now we're going to press. We're just going to press that edge, and what I like to do is kind of arrange the sleeve so that this edge is straight here at the bottom, right? And I'm going to give these pleats a little tug to sort of straighten them out. My pins are kind of crooked, but my pleats are straight. We'll just press this bottom edge. Now we're going to sew across these pleats here, just inside the seam line. There we go, and now we'll repeat for our other sleeve. We're going to add a gathering stitch now to the cap of our sleeve, and we're going to place this gathering stitch between the 3 notches that are on the cap here. Put 2 rows just inside the seam allowance, and just like we did for the shoulder seam. And we'll repeat for the other sleeve cap. And now we're going to gather up this edge. Always pull from both sides so you don't pull your threads all the way through. Arrange them initially until we get our armhole here. So we have our armhole. We're going to lay our sleeve along the armhole here. I usually like to pin right down here at the armhole side seam juncture first. And then I'm going to find each of the notch placements. So there's 3 notches, and the notch that's in the center of your sleeve between the other 2 is going to go to this notch that's behind the front shoulder seam. So this right here is my front, this is my back, and we're going to place this notch lined up to this notch here because the shoulder seam on this blouse comes forward. So this is the true shoulder line right here. And if you want to pin more to line this up, you can. I'll just try and do all the notch areas so that I know I have the right amount of gathers already in there. All right, so we have one notch matching to the shoulder seam, one gathering stitch notch, the other gathering stitch notch matching to the second notch on the armhole, and then the middle notch of the sleeve cap matching to the notch that's closest to the shoulder seam there. All right, we're going to sew this a 1/2 inch seam allowance. There we go. To put my stitch just outside the gathering stitches there so they won't show. And now we can remove our gathering stitches if you like, all the threads. And now we can finish this edge here, however you're finishing your edges. All right, there we have our sleeve attached to the armhole. Gathers here at the top, very sweet. Let's sew our side seam. So we're going to match up our underarm and our side seam of our blouse. And I'm going to start from the bottom so that I can press my sleeve seam toward the sleeve. We'll sew this at a 1/2 inch seam and we can match our notches along the way. If your fabric is a little bit thicker and you feel like this is a little too thick to press both of your sleeve seams toward the sleeve, you can offset it to kind of flatten out the thickness there. And we'll finish the seam. We have a little blouse. Look at that, very cute. Now we're going to hem, so let's take this to the iron. We have a 1/2 inch or 12 millimeter hem allowance here. So we're going to press this up along the hem. All right, we have our hem ironed. You can sew this from the right side. You can also sew from the wrong side if you feel more comfortable with that. There we go. Of our hem. We're going to sew our left button placket now. So we're going to press this in half, give it a good pressing in half, and then you're going to press under the long uninterfaced edge here a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to trim it down to a 1/4 inch. You want to press it first just because it's a little easier to press a 1/2 inch rather than a 1/4 inch. We're going to sew our placket to the left front. As if you're wearing the shirt, we're talking about the left front. And we're going to put the interfaced edge along the front here, and we're going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam. We're going to let the placket hang off at the end by a 1/2 inch here on our hemmed edge. We can match our notch. And the placket goes flush to the neckline edge here, just like this. All right, so now let's press our placket. We're going to press the seam toward the placket. Fold our placket. Okay, now we're going to finish the hem of the placket. So we're going to fold the placket right sides together right here. And we're going to keep all of our seams pressed toward the placket. There. We're going to sew straight across here at the bottom, lining up to that hem edge. Just like this. Right here. And now we can turn this right side out. We can trim that if you like. If you can get a nice point without trimming it, you can do that as well. Just depends on the fabric choice you have. All right, so now we're going to close our placket up. So let's get rid of some of these threads and we'll fold this over, lining it up along this edge. All right, so now we're gonna sew from the right side so our stitching looks nice. I'm gonna sew right over my pins. We're gonna do both edges. All right, now we have our left placket on there. All right, we're gonna get ready our covered button placket. So this one's a little bit confusing. So you can see you have these columns here, A, B, C, and D, which are really helpful. And if you want to label your pattern piece, that might help you out later. So I'm going to give you some visuals. So now this is our fabric and it's wrong side up. We're going to interface one of our 1.5 inch strips to this section D right here. So we're just going to lay it right here on the pattern piece. I've also ironed under this long edge, a 1/2 inch along A. And I did that so that I could make sure I kept things straight for you. So now I'm going to line this up and we're going to put the 1 inch strip of interfacing along B right here. So every other row is interfaced, and the one along D edge is 1.5 inches wide interfacing, and this one here, the second column, is B. And remember, this fabric is wrong side up, but my pattern piece is right side up. So I'm going to put my interfacing between the notches. You can use a ruler and make sure that you're staying a nice even distance there. All right, so I've unironed my edge A here so that we can do all of our steps exactly the same. So now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this right sides together. And we're going to press. All right, there we go. It's right sides together. Let's make sure we have the right width. All right, so now we're going to open this up and we're going to iron 1/2 inch turn back on column A. We're still in the same order as the paper here. So we're going to fold the 1/2 inch seam. We're going to fold the 1/2 inch edge along A here. Now you can trim this down to 1/4 inch. I'm going to leave mine since my fabric has a lot of texture to it and it makes it a little too narrow for the sewing. All right, so now we're going to put this back right sides together, folded, right? Here's A, B, C, D. And now we're going to fold A to B, or A over B. All right, so here's A, B, and now we're going to flip this over. And we're going to fold D over C. And what I'm thinking about right now is making sure that this fold lines up to this outer fold here, because this is our outer placket. This is the one, D is the one that's going to show to the world. And we want to cover up this under placket here. So I'm going to pull that over, make sure that covers it up. All right, there we go. So now we have an accordion folded placket here. D, C, B, and A. And this is what's going to show to the world. D, C, B, A. All right, let's sew it on. All right, so we're going to pin our placket right sides together, the D edge, the wider unfolded edge here, to the right side of our front here, our right front. We're going to line up the neck raw edge to the raw edge of the placket, and then our placket's going to hang a 1/2 inch lower than the shirt because we still need to hem it, just like we did on the left placket. See, so here's our hem lined up to a 1/2 inch below the edge of the bottom of the placket. All right, here we have our placket onto our front. All right, so we're gonna press our center front seam toward the placket here. Be careful you don't undo any of the creases that we added to our placket here. All right, so now we're gonna open up the placket here, but we're gonna keep A and B still folded against each other, wrong sides together, and we're gonna add our buttonholes to this placket edge here. So, yep, you're gonna get this done right while we're sewing the blouse. Okay, we're back from our buttonholes, and now we're gonna add some Bartacks, or I'm just gonna do some straight stitches, but you can use your buttonhole stitch to continue sewing and make some Bartacks. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this placket, here's our buttonholes here, and we're gonna fold it over onto C. So now the wrong side of our buttonholes are facing up. All 3 of these plackets are stacked on top of each other. D is left alone. So I'm going to measure in between my buttonholes and halfway there, put my placement for my Bartack. All right, we're going to line up our Bartack to the edge of A right here, but not past it, and sew our marks. So here we have our Bartacks. Trim them up a little bit. So you can see here's the fold right here. And we're not going past that point there. These won't be visible to the right side. All right, so here is our button placket, looking good. So now we're going to hem our placket. We're going to take these 3 layers here, and here's D and our fold line here, and we're going to put this right sides together. We're going to sew across, lining it up to our hem. Just like this. Here we have our hem lined up there. We can trim and turn. There we go, we have our placket hemmed. So let's press this and get our placket ready to finish. And we're going to close it up by edge stitching this edge down here. All right, so now we're going to finish up our placket here. So I'm going to trim some of these threads, and then we'll secure this edge down, covering our seam here. So we're going to pin this right along this edge, and we're going to sew from the right side. All right, and so from the right side, we're going to edge stitch along the left side of this placket here. All right, and here we have our blouse with our hidden placket, and now we'll put on the collar or the tie. All right, we're going to be doing the tie view, so it doesn't matter which tie you're doing, we're going to do the same steps. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the center back seam of the tie, which is the narrow end here. So we're going to put this right sides together, and we're going to do both sets of ties. Now we'll do the interfaced pair. We're going to press the seam open, and now we're going to place our ties right sides together. All right, we're going to place our tie with our interfaced side up and the uninterfaced side down. We're going to match our center back seam, our notches, and we're going to sew all the way around the perimeter from one notch, then one neck notch here, all the way around and ending at the other neck notch, leaving this section open between the notches. All right, now here we are right here, back at our neck notch right here. Mine's interfaced over. And you want to stop precisely there because we need to fit our neckline into this space right here. All right, now with this opening here, we're going to clip up to our stitch line here, just right up to there. Each one, just like this. All right, so here's our clip right here along our neckline right here. All right, so now we're going to press this edge between the notches, the uninterfaced edge, 1/2 inch up. Let's go to the iron. All right, so here we have our tie. Let's press this seam up in there. And now we're going to press up this uninterfaced edge, 1/2 inch seam, just like usual. All right, now we're going to trim our corners here and we're going to turn our ties right side out and press. All right, so here we go. We have our tie ironed and we have this opening right here. All right, so we're going to place our tie right sides together, the unpressed edge here to our neckline. So the neckline notch here, it's going to go to this notch just behind the shoulder seam, because remember the shoulder is forward. So that is correct. If you're having trouble lining it up. All right, so we're going to sew this right sides together. All right, so here we have our tie on our neckline. All right, so we're going to press our seam up into the tie here. You can iron this if you like. I'm going to enclose the entire raw edge up there. All right, now so we can either stitch in the ditch from the right side here, catching that inner collar, or you can hand sew it. All right, so I'm going to show you a few hand stitches for just a little bit of the neck here, because I'm going to use this shirt to also sew the other view with the collar. And I would just catch the underside of the collar here and then sink it down into the seam allowance of the neckline there right above the seam, so that none of the stitches are visible on the right side. I'm not the best hand sewer. And you can even do a few at a time if you want, sliding your needle between both layers, just like this. This isn't going to be visible to the outside, so the stitches don't have to be invisible if you don't want. You can even do something that looks like this. where you're taking kind of big stitches. And as long as you're not sewing with the needle on the outside, you can use these bigger stitches just like that and it'll look just fine. And if you want to slip a label in there, now's a good time to do so right here at the center back. All right, we're going to attach our collar now. So we're going to take the interfaced collar. We're going to line this collar up right sides together to our neckline. I like to start from the center back here, and we'll pin our double notches together, and we'll line up our shoulder notch to the notch on the neckline. We're going to leave 1/2 inch hanging off of the end here for seam allowance. All right, we'll sew our collar to our neckline. We're going to check that our plackets match in length. All right, we're going to press the seam up, and we're going to take our other collar and do some pressing on it as well. And now we're going to take this long edge here, and we're going to press it up 1/2 inch. We're going to place our collars right sides together now. We're going to sew this long top curved edge. Here we go. Here's our collar. All right, so we're going to trim this edge here. You can grade your seam allowances if they are a little bit thick. You might find it a little bit easier to get a nice curve here if you clip along this curve, just right up to the seam line. The more clips you have, the smoother the curve you're going to get. All right, now we're going to press. And what I like to do with these little curves here is I press, I'm going to try and press it open, or at least get this seam as flat as possible here before we flip it right side out. So we'll try and, sometimes I'll stick something in there to kind of give me something to press against. All right, and now we're going to press the collar up first. Get a nice smooth seam right there at the top edge of the collar. And now turn it and flip it to the inside. So now I use my finger to really smooth this curve out. Sometimes opening the seam here. Really making it spread apart there. And then we'll get this little edge here. All right, and so now we can get ready to position our collar so that we can top stitch it from the right side. Don't forget to add a label. All right, you can pin your collar to the inside of your neckline. All right, so we have our collar all pinned, and we're going to sew this from the right side, catching in this edge. And we're going to try and make sure we get our edges in here, our corners. All right, so we're going to start at the center back neck here and hide our back stitches right back there. And we're going to go all the way around the perimeter of the collar. All right, and here we are back at the beginning. Back stitch. Take out all of our pins. Make sure we caught our neckband, our collar. All right, here we have our collar. So we need one buttonhole right here at the top of your covered placket here. So your right front collar needs one buttonhole and it'll be horizontal. All right, so our last step is to attach our sleeve bands here. So we're gonna take our sleeve band and we're gonna sew it right sides together along this short end here. 1/2 inch seam. All right, we're gonna press the seam open, and now we're gonna press one long edge 1/2 inch up, just like this. All right, we're going to sew our unpressed edge right sides together to our sleeve. We're going to press the seam to the back. All right, now we're going to press our seam allowance toward the sleeve band and press our band around the edge, just like this. All right, we're ready to sew. So we have our whole cuff pinned. I'm going to start at the underarm seam here, sewing from the right side and edge stitch along the seam, catching the band underneath. There we go. All right. All right, we'll repeat for our other sleeve, and then you're done. Thanks so much for sewing the Swanton blouse with me. I look forward to sewing with you again.